Today I'm talking to Dr. Catherine Coumans, Research Coordinator and Asia Pacific Program Coordinator with Mining Watch Canada, about deep sea mining on the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. Hi, Dr. Coumans.
Hello there.
What is deep sea mining?
Well, that's a big question, but let me start by saying that there is no deep sea mining happening yet. So this can still be stopped. So that's really important. But what some companies and some countries want to do is they want to lower huge machines onto the seabed, and they want to target certain structures that are on the seabed that contain metals. There's three types of habitat for all the animals that live down on the seabed. One is called hydrothermal vents. So they look like smoking chimneys, and they have a lot of species that are really unique to those chimneys. And then there's these rock-like shapes that are on the seabed that are called polymetallic nodules. They're about the size of something you could hold in your hand, like a rock you could hold in your hand. And then there's seamounts, which are like underwater mountains. And they're also covered with these crusts. And in those crusts are the metals, but they would destroy those crusts. And those crusts are, again, where the creatures attach themselves and where they live. And those nodules on the seabed floor that look like rocks that you could hold in your hand, they're also the habitat. The seabed is very soft. And so these hard rocks give the animals something to attach to. They lay their eggs there. That's where they live. So these structures contain metals, and they want to get those metals. So they want to put these huge machines on the seabed to go after the metals. However, these structures are also the homes for all the species that live on the seabed.
Yeah. What kind of metals are in there?
There's a whole lot of different metals. There's things like copper and nickel and cobalt and manganese, but there's also silver and gold, depending on which of these structures they go after.
So they just run them over.
Yeah, what they would do is with the hydrothermal vents, so these chimney-like formations, they will literally put huge machines on the seabed floor and just crush them, just break them, remove them, completely destroy them. With those rock forms, the polymetallic nodules, they're going to suck them up with anything that's attached to them, all the animals, and remove them all together. And with the seamount crusts, they're going to destroy the crust. And what's really important to understand is that these take millions of years to form. So when they're gone, they're not coming back. They're basically gone forever. So these are very unique structures that we don't have anywhere else on Earth. And the creatures that live on these structures are also completely unique. So if you destroy them or suck them up to the ship or break them down and destroy them and remove them, you're basically creating a dead zone in the ocean.
You are a deep sea mining researcher. What effects do studies show that deep sea mining has on our planet?
Well, luckily it's not yet happening, but the first effect would be to remove and destroy this habitat. So these species that are living in the very deep sea and are connected to all the other species going all the way up the water column will be removed. It's almost like going into a tropical rainforest and removing the soil out from underneath all the trees. You know that the rest of the things that are above the soil are also going to be affected. So that's the first impact. The other impact, of course, is that the species that are living down there are very unique. We don't have them anywhere else on Earth. So they live for a really long time. They can live up to 4,000 years, but they're very slow to mature. They're very slow to reproduce. And once they've been destroyed, you're not going to see them back. So whole species could be destroyed. And the problem is we haven't really studied this part of the ocean very much yet. So we don't even really know what's down there yet. And yet it's being proposed to go down there and mine and destroy the habitat and destroy the species before we even know what they are and how they function.
Yeah. I recently talked to Eric Hoyt about the importance of plankton to the planet. It seems like no amount of study will convince scientists this is a good idea. More than 700 scientists from 44 countries have already opposed the industry by signing an open letter calling for a pause. How much of the world's oceans have been studied?
Yeah, well, this is really important. And this is what the scientists are saying. The scientists are saying we can't go and destroy this deep sea bed and these habitats that all the species there rely on when we don't even know yet really what's down there. Every time scientists have a chance to get down into the deep sea, they discover new species every single time. only about 5% of the deep ocean has been studied, which is really very, very little. So it's really irresponsible to think about destroying something when we don't even yet understand what's there and even how it connects, because what you have to understand is that the species on the deep sea are linked to all the other species in the water column all the way to the surface, like right up to whales and dolphins and tuna and all the species that we do understand. These things are all connected in the ocean. It's not like they're in separate areas and they don't connect with each other. So we're really taking a huge risk if we're to let this go ahead. That's not me saying that, but that's really what the scientists are saying. And it's very unusual for scientists to sign these kinds of letters where they say this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do it. You know, scientists like to stick to their science and let politicians and other people make these decisions, but they're so worried about this that they're actually starting to speak up.
Yeah. And we're part of the food chain too. If the fish die, the bears won't have enough to eat. We won't have enough food to eat.
Yeah, you know, it's so important what you're saying. If we let this go ahead, it's this huge gamble, it's this huge risk. And the people who are speaking out the loudest right now are the people who live in the Pacific Ocean. Because one of the big, huge areas, and this is an area as big as British Columbia and the Yukon combined, is one of the areas they want to mine. Because this kind of mining, especially for polymetallic nodules, will take a huge amount of space. So it will create a huge dead zone in the ocean, in the Pacific. So Pacific peoples are really speaking out and they're saying, no, the ocean is our home. It's where our livelihood comes from. It's where our food comes from. And we don't want any more risks taken with the ocean. I mean, the oceans are already very stressed, right? There's a lot of pollution in the oceans. There's acidification from climate change. So Pacific people are saying we don't want another industrial exploitation of our oceans, which could really have dramatic effects on their food security.
The deepest fish ever known to be able to survive, a baby snailfish, was discovered swimming at 8,363 meters below the surface. And that discovery was announced a week ago. How can anyone think we have the knowledge to say deep sea mining is safe for the creatures in our oceans?
Listen, Robert, it's not safe. The scientists are telling us it's not safe. And what's really troubling is it's not safe, so it's not responsible, and it's not necessary. We don't need to go into the deep ocean to get these metals. We have enough metals on Earth, and it's really only being proposed because it's profitable. Mining companies and some countries now see that they can make a lot of money by digging up these metals from the seabed, and that's why they're planning to go ahead. If we were to make decisions just on whether it's responsible and safe and whether we're going to protect the species that are down there, protect the food chain, there's no way we would do this. It's just the pressure is on because of companies that want to make money. That's really what this is about.
The world's oceans sequester 1/3 of the carbon we produce. When you think about how much damage to the earth we've done, imagine the disaster you can't see. According to the IPCC, we are in a climate emergency and we need to sequester every drop of carbon we can. Why don't they just recycle the 2 billion tons of waste we create on the planet every year to get the materials we need?
Oh my goodness, that's such an important question. And let me just also say one more thing that the scientists are telling us, which is that not only would we destroy species and the food chain by destroying the habitat for these creatures on the deep sea bed, but we're also likely to make climate change worse because a lot of the carbon that gets sequestered in the ocean gets sequestered in the seabed. So if we're putting huge machines down there and we're kicking up all of the sediments that are down there, there's a very good chance that what we're doing is remobilizing that carbon that has been basically captured by the seabed. So not only should we not do it because we're destroying habitat and we're destroying species and we're likely going to be affecting the full web of life in the ocean, but we're also going to make climate change worse. And to get back to your question about why are we looking for metals at the bottom of the ocean and destroying a habitat we barely understand, when there's other ways to get those metals. And certainly there's a lot of research being done right now, and there's a lot of push by people who care about these things that we should be recycling the metals that we already have above ground. And so that's certainly, for example, the metals that we have in all of our electronics should be recycled. But also what we're discovering is that there's a lot of metals left over in the waste of the mining that's happened on land. So we have huge, what we call tailings storage areas. So the tailings are the waste product of mining on land. And they're so big, some of them can be seen from space, and also waste rock. When you dig a mine on land, you're only looking for certain bits of the ore that's in that mine, but a whole bunch of the rock you just put aside. But that rock can still contain many, many metals. So they're starting to say, hey, shouldn't we be remining the material we've already dredged up, the tailings and the waste rock from mines? So that's just being talked about now, but they're starting to do some studies and they're finding lots of metals that we could get. And we also need to reduce, right? It's not just, we can't just keep needing more and more and more because we only have one Earth. So we need to reduce, we definitely need to recycle, but we also need to look at the waste from mining on land and see if we can mine that waste again to get some more metals.
Vanuatu, Plateau, Fiji, Micronesia, New Zealand, Panama, Samoa, Germany, Costa Rica, Chile, Spain, Ecuador, and France all support a ban. Canada has banned deep sea mining in our waters, but it was disappointingly quiet at the talks in Jamaica. It feels like Canada thinks it's going to be okay to destroy other people's ecosystems, just not ours. But the truth is, it would affect everyone around the globe, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start with the good news because I loved hearing you name all the countries that are now really waking up and saying, no, 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 we can't do this. And we've just had two more added, Vanuatu and the Dominican Republic. So two more countries have just joined, and that's the way we want to go, right? So what about Canada? Unfortunately, Canada's position has really been misrepresented in the media. Canada actually has not said that it's for a moratorium on deep seabed mining in our own waters. And Canada has not said that there should be a moratorium in international waters. And by the way, the seabed in the international waters is called the common heritage of humankind. It's recognized by the United Nations as belonging to all of us. Canada has not actually said that there should be a moratorium either in Canadian waters or in international waters. What Canada has said is kind of sneaky. What Canada has said is, look, there's no regulations for mining in Canadian waters yet. So it's like there's a moratorium because without regulations, we can't mine. And there's no regulations for mining in international waters yet. So it's kind of like there's already a moratorium because without regulations, we can't mine. But Canada is actively working on creating the regulations for mining in international waters. And if those regulations get passed, it would be very easy to imagine that Canada would say, well, look, there's already regulations for mining in international waters. We should also have regulations for mining in Canadian waters. They haven't actually come right out and said, we will never allow mining in the seabed in Canadian waters. They've never said that. They just said there's an effective moratorium. It's like there's a moratorium because we don't yet have the regulations, but regulations can be made. So it's not a real commitment. It's just a statement of fact. It's just a statement of the way things are right now. It's not an actual commitment. And we really need to push Canada. Canada needs to make a commitment that we will never mine the seabed in Canadian waters. And Canada needs to also join those wonderful countries that have said there shouldn't be mining in international waters either.
I'm surprised because Canada is such a good country with the environment. Because whenever I go to climate strikes, Fridays for Future, I see hundreds of people.
You know what? Canada is really good at projecting an image around the world of being very concerned about the environment. And certainly when you go to those rallies, those are young people. And I think our young people are awesome. I mean, you are awesome. And I think that's our hope, right? But when it comes to our government, Canada is very pro mining, right? Our government really loves mining. And I think it's very hard for our government to say no to mining, even if this is not mining on land, but mining in the sea, because we've pressured them. I've been in meetings with our civil servants, and I've been in meetings with the people who go to the International Seabed Authority meetings where these decisions are made. And we keep saying, why won't you declare a moratorium? Why won't you join the leaders of the world? They even call a moratorium a dirty word. They say, well, we don't want to use that word. We just want to create really good regulations. but regulations are to allow something to happen, not to stop it from happening. So we really need Canada to say, you know what? No, this just shouldn't happen. It's irresponsible. But Canada has not said that, not for our territorial waters and not for international waters. It's what we need Canada to do, but it hasn't happened yet.
People are saying that the International Seabed Authority needs to be reformed. The Secretary General Michael Lodge has been accused of not being neutral by trying to push people to accelerate the start of deep sea mining. The ISA decision making procedures are crazy. 131 of its 167 member countries have no vote when it comes to the ISA deciding whether to approve or disapprove applications for seabed mining. Only 12 countries need to approve it. The ISA are due to meet again in July when a 2-year loophole expires and companies can start mining in the international seabed area. How is this fair?
Wow, Robert, this is such an important question. You would think that if you're going to allow a whole new industrial activity on Earth into a whole new part of our Earth that is very, very much untouched, it's an area that we don't understand and we haven't destroyed yet. You would think that you would have a really strong governance structure before you would allow that to happen. And we have such a weak governance structure. The ISA is really not fit for purpose. And it's now even member states of the ISA that are really starting to speak up and say, this is wrong. So Germany has complained about the fact that the Secretary General is acting more like he's a lobbyist for the industry than he is acting as a neutral regulator. And there have been complaints made about what you just said. So there's a small committee called the Legal and Technical Committee, and it only has 12 members, and they're not even countries. They are representatives that have been chosen by countries. So they're individuals. And a lot of them have a background in business or law, but they're not deep sea mining experts at all. And they're the ones that get the proposals when mining companies want to have an exploration permit, or later on when they want to have a mining permit, it goes to that legal and technical committee, those 12 individuals. And they make a recommendation to the council, and then the council will decide. But the recommendation has always just been rubber stamped because they're the ones that review the proposal. And then they make a recommendation. So there's efforts underway now. There were meetings recently at the International Seabed Authority in Jamaica in March, and Germany and the Netherlands put forward a proposal and said, when a mining company comes to you with a proposal to start mining, you can review the proposal and you can give us your review, but you should not be making a recommendation to allow it to happen, because the Legal and Technical Committee has never turned down a proposal for exploration. They don't seem to ever do that. And there's also a lot of work being done about, whether or not the council could say, well, no, we're not going to let this go ahead. But there's so much uncertainty about all of this. It's like they're literally making up the rules as they go along, and under a lot of pressure because the mining companies have been spending a lot of money and they've got shareholders, and those shareholders want to see a return on their investment. So those mining companies are putting lots of pressure on the International Seabed Authority and saying, hey, we want to start mining. And the International Seabed Authority doesn't have the regulations for mining done yet. They don't have the governance structures sorted out. They're still trying to figure out who can make a decision. They don't have the financial arrangements worked out, and mining companies want to start putting in proposals to start mining as early as July of this year. So how crazy is that?
I just want to say to the ISA, if they're listening, that the oceans are not one person's to spoil. It's all of our planet, and on behalf of the 2.2 billion kids out there, we do not give your permission to ruin our home. How can we stop deep sea mining from happening?
I think what really needs to happen is your voice needs to be heard at the ISA. It would be amazing if kids could come down to Jamaica when the meetings are happening in July and be able to say, don't do this. We don't want you to do this. This is our planet and our futures that you're destroying. When the meetings happened in March, for the first time, people from the Pacific countries were there, and they were able to stand up and say, we don't want this to happen. So I think it would be amazing if kids could either create a petition or send someone down to actually speak up. And the Canadian delegation, the government delegation, can add kids to the delegation. They can add anyone they want. So maybe we need to raise that and say it's time for the children's voices to be heard.
I would totally do that.
You'd be amazing.
Thank you. This has been a really great talk. Thanks so much for joining me today. And remember, together kids can save the world. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Bye.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for caring.